a killer at large, a bloodthirsty beast, and a restaurant's nasty secret. All deadly, but not all true. Let's find out how perceptive you are in today's episode. It's time to decide what's fact or fiction.
The line that divides the factual from the unreal has long since blurred. The tales we once thought fantastical, now implanted as truth. To decipher verity from the imagined, you must break from the ordinary and consider a universe where the outlandish prevails. Can you expand your mind to see beyond our perceived reality? Can you decide what's fact or fiction?
What goes on in the mind of a serial killer? Are they ever able to turn a new leaf and shut off whatever demons haunt them? The Butcher of Miami could be a case study in serial killers since his string of murders mysteriously stopped. Now, if only the police could catch him.
Our anonymous source sat quietly across from me as I prepared to dig deep into the hardest case of his life, the gruesome murders of a killer that simply fell off of the map. Claiming to be an officer that once worked on the case, the source seemed anxious to get started. So without another moment's pause, I told him to start from the beginning. We all know Miami isn't a city of saints, but when the news of the first murder came in, it still hits you hard. I've been working in the city for about a decade at that point, and nothing surprised me. But seeing Loretto Gallows' lifeless body in that dark, lonely alley, it just hit me. One bullet wound to the back of the head. It was all her killer needed. We had hoped, if anything, it was a one-off, maybe a crime of passion. But then Janice White's murder came through the radio. Another gunshot wound to the head, no DNA, and only tire tracks to go off of. There was still the chance that it wasn't connected, which in a way made us feel better. But then February 24th, 2006 came, as did the murder of Ivana Patterson. Responding to an anonymous tip, which came from someone we later cleared, Patterson's body was found also shot. But the crime scene was a little different. It appeared as if she had struggled with her killer. As much as we tried to use what little DNA evidence we had to track down the killer, all we ever hit were dead ends. For more than a year, we went without similar incidents, giving us a false sense of reprieve. Deep down, we knew they were still out there, and it was only a matter of time until they killed again. And on January 2nd, 2008, they did. 39-year-old Jamie Charles was found with a gunshot wound to the head, though estimations believe she died sometime in early December 2007. We couldn't catch a break in this case. Everything was too clean-cut, and whoever was responsible was too careful. I've long since retired, but this case still haunts me. Is he still out there? Was it even just one killer? Maybe we're chasing one person when we should have been chasing several. People seem to have forgotten about the murders, but I never have. I constantly question why those women, if there were more, and if it's possible our culprit has moved on to another part of Florida, bringing with him his reign of terror.
Miami-Dade County Police have been trying to answer the question of what happened to the Southern Florida killer for 10 years, always coming up empty-handed. Did he just vanish? Or did he never exist to begin with? I'll leave you with that thought while we move on to our second story, one of Mother Nature's ruthlessness. While enjoying the warm October waters of Louisiana, John Mason found himself in the territory of a feared predator.
John Mason learned what became of the behemoth that nearly took his life, but it wasn't quite enough to ease any trauma he had suffered due to his near-fatal encounter. The nearly 12-foot alligator had been calling Lake Pontchartrain home without anyone knowing. At least John had to assume so, considering that it was a recommended swimming spot. Mason had traveled from Tallahassee with the intention of simply enjoying the bayou, and he never expected that he'd spend the tail end of his stay in the hospital. He's just lucky it wasn't the morgue. Only minutes after submerging himself in Lake Pontchartrain during a canoe trip with friends, Mason saw the hulking beast gliding its way toward him. He could remember the feeling of the beast's powerful jaws closing over his head and shaking him violently. He had no other thought, save that he was going to die. And once he found out just how big the alligator was, he was shocked that he didn't. Just shy of 12 feet, the gator was more than big enough to tear the Tallahassee man to pieces. Mason still doesn't know how he survived, though he heard about how his friends scrambled for help for about an hour, likely assuming in that time their friend would be gator food. Mason limped away with injuries to his trachea, and as he underwent surgery to repair the damages, the beast was captured and killed. Mason survived the impossible and walked away with a new set of scars and the unwanted knowledge of just how powerful an alligator's jaw really is.
Whether you know a lot about alligators or not, you're likely aware of the powerful jaws they sport. So then you know how unlikely it is for someone to escape. But does that automatically mean this story is nothing more than a fallacy? Ponder it for a minute as we get ready for our third and final story for tonight's episode. It's an uncomfortable one that may have you reconsidering dining out. 3 patrons of the same restaurant were enjoying their meals one night, only to find themselves in a nightmare weeks later.
Thomas Fines, Bethany McFarland, and Joseph Spring had nothing in common before they all landed at their doctor's office with the same symptoms. The fever and aching led them all to believe they were suffering the flu. But when a round of flu medication failed to alleviate their symptoms, they were convinced something worse was wrong with them. As they later found, they weren't entirely wrong. Thomas, Bethany, and Joseph had all enjoyed a meal at a local pizzeria on the same evening. The Leaning Tower in Bardstown, Kentucky, was the city's go-to eatery for pizza. But it was harboring a grotesque secret that put the business and its patrons at risk. Restaurant staff was diligent in keeping the front of the house clean, but it failed to give the back of the establishment the same attention. Known to management, the Leaning Tower had a cockroach problem that they were miraculously able to keep the public from finding out about. That is, of course, until 3 of its customers contracted Ganglionoma pulchrum. The parasite was discovered in Thomas, Bethany, and Joseph when they started to complain of a strange sensation in their mouths. Upon inspection, it was determined that their fevers were connected to the rough patches of skin that would move sporadically, which was a symptom of infection by the parasite. Even after the parasite was removed, the 3 patrons of the popular pizzeria still had to live with the reality that, during their meal, they had eaten something contaminated by the cockroach infestation. When local papers tried to contact the trio, who remained strangers despite their connection formed from the grotesque scenario, not one could muster the desire to recount the incident. Unfortunately for the Leaning Tower, when a reporter caught wind of 3 cases of a rare parasite in the small town, it was determined that all 3 patrons had eaten there on the same evening weeks before the parasite infection started to show symptoms. After its first health inspection, the Leaning Tower closed its doors for good.
What more is there to say beside gross? Wouldn't more than 3 people suffer an outbreak if conditions really were that bad? Better yet, how did conditions get that bad when restaurants are supposed to undergo routine inspections? Well, it's time to find out, because it's the moment we've all been waiting for, the reveal.
Are you ready to find out if you can decipher between fact or fiction? Let's look back at tonight's 3 stories and find out which were born from reality and which were fabrications of the imagination.
We started tonight's episode with a killer at large in Miami-Dade County. Though it sounds like we're riffing Dexter, this is based on a real open case in Florida. The biggest difference from our story and the truth is the location. The real murders occurred in Daytona Beach, Florida. The FBI listed the string of murders as one of 28 unsolved cases thought to have been committed by a long-haul trucker. Where do you stand on the story about John Mason, the man that saw the inside of an alligator's mouth and lived to tell about it? It may not sound like an encounter that one would live through, but James Kevin Morrow is proof that it's possible. From Jacksonville, Florida, James was canoeing in Juniper Creek, Florida, when he decided to take a swim. That's where he met the 11-foot 8-inch alligator responsible for the scars on his neck. The gator was later killed, though the Florida Game and Freshwater Fish Commission commented on the incident, claiming it wasn't an attack intended to kill, but instead to warn off the canoer. We've heard horror stories about restaurant cleanliness, but so bad that it's caused a rash of parasitic infections? If you're now concerned about dining out, don't fret too much. The disgusting story of Thomas, Bethany, and Joseph may be a thing of nightmares, but it's not based on true events.
How well did you do in tonight's video? Did you look past the deception of our world and define the off-blurred line that struggles to separate lies from the truth? Let us know in the comment section below. And should you find the urge to test your perceptions again, be sure to subscribe and join us next time when we ask you to decide what's fact or fiction.